On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we talk about the China trade wars and how they're affecting the technology industry. Plus, we talk about web attacks today and basically SQL injection. Plus, Brian, Curtis, and I talk with Mark Balkenende, Director of Technical Product Marketing at Talend, about ETL solutions and big data. Twice on the set.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
This is Twit, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 346, recorded June 14th, 2019. Building Data Trust with Talend. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage. Thinking about moving your data storage to the cloud? Wasabi is enterprise-class cloud storage at 1/5 the price of Amazon S3 and up to 6 times faster with no hidden fees for egress or API requests. Calculate your savings and try Wasabi with free unlimited storage for a month at wasabi.com and enter the code ENTERPRISE. Welcome to Twit, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that's dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world is connected. I'm your host, Lou MARESCA, your guide through this big world of the enterprise, but I definitely can't guide you by myself. Let's go ahead and bring in two of the top enterprise tech professionals in the industry, starting with our very own geek in paradise, Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, what's keeping you busy down there in the Paradise State, or the state of Paradise, I guess?
Just installing and configuring and building power monitors and occupancy sensors and things like that. The finding out WinSockets was some of the implementations of WinSocket servers are disappointing in how little security there is.
Oh yeah.
But I think I have a way around it. There's a cute trick. If I don't put a gateway in on the IP configuration, it can't talk, theoretically, it can't talk to anything outside of its subnet. And if I put a gateway there and only the gateway can get out, maybe that will at least do a small bit to protecting my data collectors.
You know, all the tricks. Well, a man who needs no introduction, our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin, senior editor at Dark Reading. Curtis, how's the weather down there in the Sunshine State?
Well, it's basic rainy season in Florida. The days are tending to dawn pretty clear, beautiful until roughly midday, when any given spot around the city will get 1 to 4 inches of rain. So it's the happy time of year for those of us who live here. Grass is growing like some sort of mutant creature, and we're having fun staying inside afternoon, and that's a good thing because I've got all kinds of projects I'm having fun with.
Now, your next trip is Black Hat, or you got something else between that?
No, the next trip I have planned is the Black Hat DEF CON duo. I'm really looking forward to those, and as a matter of fact, that's some of what I'm working on. I'm talking to some of the people who are going to be taking part in some of the villages, and also hoping to carry some stuff with me. I'm getting into some of the software-defined radio stuff, trying to put together a little travel kit that I can take care of or take with me to pop in on the radio frequency village that is always such fun at DEF CON.
Fantastic. Looking forward to that coverage for sure. Well, folks, we have a pretty great show today. We're not only going to chat about the China trade wars that are going on, how it's affecting the actual tech industry. We're also going to talk about the most abundant of web attacks today, SQL injection. Plus, our guest today, Mark Balkenende, Director of Technical Product Marketing at Talend, is going to talk about ETL solutions and big data. But before we get into all that goodness, let's go ahead and jump into this week's blips. Now, it wouldn't be an enterprise week without a report of data breach, so let's go ahead and kick it off for you. Now, you know Evite, the site that does social planning and e-invitations, and one of the biggest sites on the internet? Well, they finally have the guts to admit it. They were victims of a data breach. Now, back in April, a hacker named Gnostic Players put up this for sale customer data of 6 companies, including Evite. There was no response from Evite at that time about a data breach, but the hacker claimed to be selling 10 million Evite user records that included full names, email addresses, IP addresses, and clear text passwords. Great. Well, the data from those 10 million Evite users was put up for sale on a dark web marketplace for about $1,900 in Bitcoin. Now, the same hacker has breached, stolen, and put up for sale the details of over 1 billion users for many other companies, including additional primary online services such as Canvas, 500 Picks, Under Armour, ShareThis, GiftCat, Get, and others. Now, fast forward 4 months since the actual breach occurred, and Evite publishes a FAQ page on its website admitting to the hack and releasing more details about the incident. Now, the company said that they're following up on an investigation. It tracked the event to a malicious activity starting on February 22nd, 2019. Evite claims the data retrieved from the the data was retrieved from an old backup in cold storage that actually started back in 2013. Now, however, the affected information could include names, usernames, email addresses, passwords, and if optionally provided to us, dates of birth and phone numbers and mailing addresses. Now, the upside, no financial data or social security numbers were exposed since Evite doesn't collect social security numbers, and all financial data is handled by third-party vendors. Now, if you have used Evite in a long time, if you actually used it for a long time, it might be time to go change your password.
Now, this is big. Some very bad people are looking for ways into the U.S. power grid. You might say we've heard this before, but not with this particular group. The attackers behind the epic Triton/Trisis attack that in 2017 targeted and shut down a physical safety instrumentation system at a petrochemical plant in Saudi Arabia have been discovered probing the networks of dozens of U.S. and Asia-Pacific electric utilities. Industrial control system security firm Dragos, which caused the attack group Xenotime, says the attackers actually began scanning electric utility networks in late 2018 using tools and methods similar to those the attackers have used in targeting oil and gas companies in the Middle East and North America. Dragos says there's no evidence at this point that Xenotime could actually wage a cyber attack that would result in a prolonged disruptive or destructive event on electric utility operations, but the group's newly discovered activity around power grid providers is definitely concerning. Now, earlier this year, FireEye Mandiant revealed that it discovered the Triton Trisis attack code installed at an industrial organization, marking the first publicly revealed attack by the group since that original incident at the Saudi Arabian plant. FireEye, an analyst, found a set of custom Triton Trisis tools tied to this second victim's organization and the attackers inside the victim's corporate IT network. Meanwhile, the Triton Xenotime group in 2018 also compromised several ICS vendors, industrial control system vendors, raising concerns of them waging supply chain style attacks. The wicked, it would seem, never rest.
Well, I've been watching this trend for a while, and the headline from ZDNet is the Linux desktop's last best shot. With Microsoft cutting off support for Windows 7, the Linux desktop may finally get its day in the sun. But are Linux companies ready to take advantage of the opportunity? Well, heck, I like Linux. Heck, one of my students actually spearheaded the Fedora project. But my biggest problem with Linux is the lack of focus. If someone disagrees with how one distribution does something, they go out and build their own. So while I applaud this flexibility, it dilutes the potential for enterprise IT management to be willing to bet on Linux for the desktop, mostly from the support angle. So while a lot of the millennials are pushing really hard for more open source in the enterprise, I really can't see upper management willing to take the risk on community-supported open source desktops. Linux is great, but the reality is we need a more cohesive support approach to really break into widespread enterprise use.
Now, one of the most apparent issues with linking different cloud providers together is obviously latency. Now, you may store data in one cloud provider data store and want to integrate it and process it or provide real-time visualizations from another cloud provider. Well, if you have a heterogeneous environment like that, it creates a problem. Well, Oracle and Microsoft are aware of this problem, and they want to make it better for organizations to integrate the two cloud service providers together, providing the best performance possible. Now, the new facilities called Microsoft Azure and Oracle Cloud will be linked through a direct high-speed network that will essentially allow customers from both companies to utilize both companies' cloud databases and services directly. Now, customers can run their software programs and store data on whichever cloud node is closest or best supported for their intended use. Now, customers from both companies can also take advantage of the tools and services that were otherwise not available to them from being subscribed to just one of the two providers. Now, as you know, regarding cloud services, Amazon leads the pack with 30% market share. Microsoft coming in at a respectable 15% of market share. Right behind those is IBM Cloud, as well as Google Cloud in fourth place. Now, the exclusive deal seems to be targeting Amazon, since the experience will be better for both Microsoft's cloud and Oracle's cloud. However, this is not the only deal in the market going and targeting Amazon. Now, Google just acquired data analytics firm Looker for $2.6 billion and enhances data visualization capabilities. Meanwhile, Salesforce just acquired data visualization company Tableau for pretty much the same reasons. I guess the old saying, if you can't build it, buy it, is starting to impact the market. Now, Amazon just might have to respond in kind with some tricks up their sleeves as well.
Well, Congress is taking another look at giving businesses permission to hack back. Hacking back, the largely controversial concept in which organizations can target intruders on their network, has reappeared in a bill poised to be the subject of arguments in Washington, D.C. Representative Tom Graves, Republican of Georgia, has reintroduced a bill that would let businesses monitor for, locate, and potentially target cyber attackers. The previous bill was found to violate the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which prohibits computer access sans authorization from the government. So why try again? Graves says businesses are already targeting intruders and points to a lack of rules around the practice. He says that if the bipartisan bill is passed, he hopes businesses will share intelligence on cyber attacks with the government, though the bill has no requirement that that take place. The U.S. Cyber Command was recently given the go-ahead for more offensive cyber operations, but there are a lot of reasons security experts think hacking back is probably a bad idea. The biggest of those reasons is that cyber criminals often take several elaborate steps to disguise their identities. As a result, it's difficult to determine who was actually behind an attack. Federal government officials and many security researchers don't think companies will be able to ascertain who targeted them and worry, reasonably in my opinion, that the risk of unintended consequences is enormous.
Well, it seems there's a new Linux backdoor someone found, and it's in the wild, and the antivirus programs don't seem to be able to detect it. So this Ars Technica story says researchers say they've discovered an advanced piece of Linux malware that has escaped detection by antivirus products and appears to be actively used in targeted attacks. Hidden Wasp, as the malware has been dubbed, is a fully developed suite of malware that includes a Trojan rootkit and initial deployment script. Researchers at a security firm Intezer reported on Wednesday of last week. At the time Intezer's post went live, the virus total malware service indicated Hidden Wasp wasn't detected by any of the 59 antivirus engines it tracks. Although some have now begun to flag it, better late than never, right? Timestamps in one of the 10 files Intezer analyzed indicated it was created last month. The command and control server that infected computers report to remain operational at this time that the article was prepared. So this is a strong recommended read for Linux administrators. Hopefully you'll go and hit the show notes and download it and take a really hard look at it. And as always, I recommend you test and then update your machines without delay. So as Linux becomes more popular, so will it become a bigger target for malware and attacks.
Now, remember Mirai, the Internet of Things botnet? Well, it caused havoc back in 2016 with a large-scale attack. Well, if you thought it was dead, you were wrong. Mirai is back, and this time its offspring might even be more of a problem. Researchers at Palo Alto Network's Unit 42 discovered a document of a new strain of which called EcoBot, a botnet malware based on the leaked Mirai source code that targets flaws in business tools. Now, the EcoBot nastyware tries to exploit, in addition to previously targeted vulnerabilities in Oracle WebLogic Server and VMware servers as well, SD1s, is to actually affect more machines on the web as well. While the original Mirai famously preyed on default credentials and consumer gear, EcoBot and similar variants are creeping into the enterprise space as well. Now, several other sources have confirmed that the expanded coverage and targets of EcoBot. Akamai security expert Larry Cashdollar noted that in the addition to the expanding outward in its range of targets, EcoBot is also looking further back in time to dig up long-forgotten security flaws. Now, Cashdollar found out that beyond the Oracle and VMware exploits, several of the malware's other new exploits are, in fact, for vulnerabilities that have been around for nearly a decade, but for one reason or another, did not get addressed. Now, these include vulnerabilities in well-known brands such as Linksys and Ubiquiti. Now, what's the lesson we keep placing on and repeating on? Well, patch if you can, and if you can't, remove the vulnerable device or installation from the internet or network before EcoBot finds it. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, the bites. But before we do, we have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Wasabi Hack Cloud Storage. Now, I've used Wasabi, and they are really an awesome cloud provider. You might say, well, cloud storage is expensive. The more you store in it, the more times you perform operations on it, and the more times you access it, it's going to cost you more. Well, in this day and age, that's the story of most of the cloud storage companies out there. Plus, as part of the cloud storage competition, most providers see how low they can go on their storage fees and their ingress and egress fees. Now, from experience, I can tell you, if you try and go to cheaper on some cloud storage systems, you're also going to give up on performance as well. Well, Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage has a way to fix all of these things for you. Now, if you're going to do a small personal project all the way up to large enterprise projects, Wasabi seems to have figured it all out. Not only do they have really low cost per gigabyte per month, but listen to this game changer. Unlimited free egress fees for your data and no charge for API calls. So you don't have to actually pay to access your data. Now go out and check right now what you're already paying for your cloud storage, because I can tell you that you not having to pay your egress fees and API calls for those CRUD operations will substantially save you money on the cost of doing business. Now, you're probably thinking, well, if they're cheaper, they must be slower as well, or they don't have as many features or bells or whistles, right? Well, Wasabi has developed some pretty amazing disruptive technology here. They found ways to actually pull raw performance out of the storage devices without compromising on anything else. Now, they have a revolutionary process that actually lays data on disks sequentially as opposed to blocks. Now, what happens is that means that Wasabi storage is 80% cheaper and 6 times faster in speed than the industry leaders. Now, are you in an organization that's worried about compliance? Well, Wasabi is HIPAA, FINRA, and CGS compliant as well. Now, fast, cheap storage isn't worth much of your time if it isn't secure, right? Well, Wasabi has that answer. Wasabi offers a unique feature called immutable buckets that can actually make sure that deleted or unaltered data cannot be done, and it protects your valuable data from accidental or malicious destruction. Now, see if you can find that on any other service out there today. Now, plus, they also offer 90-day rotating integrity checks, as well as 11 nines. That's right, 11 nines of durability. Now, it's huge for a cloud service provider today. Now, are you worried about data migration to the cloud? Well, Wasabi has another answer for you there as well. They have the Wasabi Ball Transfer Appliance. This thing is powered by Netgear, and it's designed to transfer large data sets and dramatically reducing your costs. Now, you might be already already thought about cloud storage, or your organization's tried to store data on-premise to save money, or it wants to be partially in the cloud. With Wasabi, it will have you rethinking those approaches. I bet you want to go try it out right now, right? Well, go build something fun and move some of your data to the cloud right now. They truly understand the needs of enterprise. They don't have things like egress fees. Calculate savings for yourself and start a free trial, unlimited storage for a month. Go to wasabi.com, click the free trial link, and enter the code enterprise. Now join the movement and migrate your data to the cloud with confidence. Go to wasabi.com and make sure to use that offer code Enterprise, and we thank Wasabi for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Now, let's go ahead and jump into this week's Bites. Now, all of us have heard about the new industrial revolution, which is being driven by AI. But did you know there's actually a new Cold War, too? And this one is in tech. Now, it's between an adversary of the U.S. that you might have heard of, China. Now, over the past year, we've listened to tit-for-tat events where China responded to the U.S., vice versa, but nothing at a grander, more impactful scale at a business level or market or trade level. Now, the latest responses from China are happening at a business level, which could start affecting markets and develop trade wars. Now, the U.S.-China feud is challenging the technology industry in areas including financial deals, supply chain, as well as talent and recruitment as well. Now, let's talk about examples here. There's been reports of companies like Samsung, Dell, and Microsoft being summoned by the Chinese government and being given ultimatums. And if they complied with the administration's recent ban on sales of key technologies to Chinese companies, they would feel it pretty hard in their relationships with them. And another example, Huawei is back in the news. The U.S. put Huawei Technologies on a trade blacklist that bars sales of components to China's leading producer of smartphones and telecom equipment without a Commerce Department license. That move has created pain for a lot of people, especially tech suppliers, including Micron Technology, one of the world's largest makers of memory chips. Now, in response this time, they're targeting a random company, Verizon, actually, demanding that they pay licensing fees on hundreds of patents that Huawei owns. Now, this one's out of the ordinary because Huawei never goes after companies in regards to IP, and it hasn't done so for Verizon in the past. This is kind of a random thing. Now, however, the trade dispute is more openly affecting other manufacturers like U.S. chip company Broadcom, where they're all $2 billion less in annual sales than expected as a result of the Washington's export restrictions on Huawei. Now, we talk markets. Should we fear that China is no longer a nation of dependent on exports? This is interesting because it's actually domestically driven economy featuring a sizable middle class and what we've called most significant. Actually, we've seen a most significant growth in the market around the world because of it. Now, I want to throw this over to you guys, starting Chee with you. Let's start with the obvious. How bad is this affecting supply chains now that we have this kind of trade restrictions on China?
Well, this has been one of my soapbox topics. It has been a long time trend. I've seen it over the last 20 or 30 years, where a lot of corporations have, rightly so, found it too expensive to produce certain components, mostly chips, things like that, domestically. They found it much, much cheaper to send it off to China and have it done. Now, the problem is, over the years, various folks have found out that, oh, gee, my proprietary chip is now all of a sudden showing up in a competitor's product. So there's been some back and forth, but to the point of domestic production capability of a lot of basic components doesn't exist anymore. I challenge anyone to tell me whether or not a U.S. manufacturer of LCDs still exists. They might exist, they might be small, but I don't hear about them. And with this, the supply chain for a lot of products maybe hasn't quite hit the news yet, but I think it will. I think as we suddenly find ourselves no longer able to buy some of these base components, we might have to go and buy them from more expensive places, or we might have to start seeing corporations rebuilding production capability. I know of one corporation that stopped making their FPGAs in-house and instead offshored it. And they're going to be in a world of hurt now. So I'm predicting, one, there's going to be a big spike in the equipment necessary to light up these types of production facilities. And who knows? This might be a case of supply chain being the flea on the tail of the dog wagging the dog. And we might start seeing corporations waking up and saying, hey, maybe we should onshore this stuff, even though it costs a little bit more, because maybe we're going to have an administration that's going to start some sort of trade war. Duh. So we shall see. It's going to be an interesting next couple of years to see how supply chain actually starts breaking down or changing direction.
Right. Now, Curtis, Cheeber brought up a couple good points here. We always talk about unintended consequences. What aren't we seeing here? Is China really too strong to be affected? Will the U.S. kind of get the raw end of this deal?
Well, China and the U.S. will both be affected. That's for sure. We are their largest customer in many areas. They are our largest in some areas. And in many ways, a trade war is like one of those adolescent contests where two people will hold their hands over a candle flame to see which one flinches first. This is going to inflict pain on both countries. The question is whether one will bear that pain better and longer than the other. Now, you see the U.S. doing things to try and bring additional pain to bear against China. We've recruited some of our allies without their willingness, really, by saying that we could place sanctions against any company that violates our restrictions, even if they're headquartered and do most of their business overseas. Do I think this is a miscalculation? Yeah, I do. Now, with that said, I don't think that the concern over Huawei's possible actions are entirely misplaced. I think there are some legitimate concerns there. I'm just not convinced that a full-out trade war is the best way to address those concerns. And I think it's a case where an awful lot of people on both sides of the Pacific Ocean are going to end up paying for issues that really concern a relative handful of direct players. You know, the kind of switches, for example, that Huawei is being targeted for, those are switches where the customers are large ISPs, large network providers, Baby Bell class telecoms, and maybe the global 20 enterprises. So there's a lot at stake over some narrow, if legitimate, concerns. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see which side really does flinch first and how they go about trying to convince the rest of the world that flinching was not at all what they were doing. Right.
Well, I'm going to throw this back to Cheeber because somehow there really some other vectors of attacks here. Like, for instance, some of these articles are saying, hey, China's government's actually targeting large enterprises, which actually root from U.S., affecting their bottom line. Now, this can actually impact online organizations, infrastructure, and more. Cheeber, is this something that we're going to see more of? Because it is kind of what Curtis is saying. It's kind of a backdoor way of affecting and sending a message so that maybe somebody flinches first.
Well, here's hoping that does happen. I'm actually a really, really big fan of history. And I am sadly going to play Chicken Little here. This is really, really similar to some of the raw materials and supply chain issues that in some ways led up to World War II. When you start cutting out large swaths of supplies that corporations depend upon, and you start dramatically affecting an entire industry, you start getting people that are really upset enough that they start pushing. And when you start having large corporations pushing on their political, shall we say, I don't like the word puppets, but political influencing, you start having people do things and they don't always completely think it out. I think supply chain actually has some really big global implications. And that if someone doesn't flinch first, I would really hate to see what happens when someone gets really and truly pissed off. And I'd really and truly hate to see a large world war again, because most of our world wars have always started over resources.
Right. So I have a very interesting, maybe even odd question. I'm going to throw this to Curtis. Is there an upside here? Can tech companies actually benefit from these kind of trade agreements, these trade wars that's going on?
I don't think that there are tech companies that can benefit from the war. I think that there are tech companies that could benefit from whatever sort of negotiated agreement comes to end the war. But even though you might be able to find the outlier that can raise its business because of the war, I think those are going to be few and far between. And let me give you an example. Huawei's cell phones, their smartphone instruments were also hit by the tariffs, so though they have become much more expensive, you'd think, oh, great, it means that, say, Apple would be able to benefit from that. But it looks like Apple's market in China is going to be cut off, which means that whatever they gain in the U.S. will be more than made up by what they lose in China. And it's that kind of balance of badness that's going to happen to an awful lot of companies. So I don't see this being a good, rosy winning situation for much of anyone.
Right. What about you, Chee? Any way of this? Is there an upside here?
I think there is one upside that I can think of. We have offshored way too much of the key components of some fairly major industries. And, just start looking at that whole brouhaha over the chips that had spyware on them. And it's all been outsourced because of cost. Now, if all of a sudden the components start having these big honking tariffs on them, maybe, just maybe, U.S. industry will see, oh, maybe we should bring that back on shore and be less dependent upon someone that we have a trade war with. Don't know. It is a potential silver lining. I tend to try to look for the rosy side, but I don't know. Time will tell.
Absolutely. Time does tell. Well, let's go ahead and put that one to bed. Let's go jump over to the Curtis's bite. Talk a little bit about the most abundant web attack today, SQL injection. Curtis?
Yeah, this is one of those interesting things. Imagine, if you will, a scenario in which the most common crime in the United States was armed robbery using a musket. Well, that's kind of what's going on in the world of cybersecurity, because when local file inclusion attacks are counted, nearly 9 in 10 attacks against websites are related to input validation failures. That's what Akamai is reporting in their State of the Internet report, where they analyzed data gathered from its users of its web application firewall technology between November 2017 and March 2019. That exercise in analysis shows that SQL injection now represents nearly 2/3 of all web application attacks. That's up sharply from the 44% of web application layer attacks that SQL injection represented just 2 years ago. Now, this other thing that I mentioned, local file inclusion attacks, are like SQL injection, enabled by a web application's failure to properly validate user input. They represent another 24.7% of attacks. Together, they represent right at 90% of all attacks at the web application layer over the 17-month period of the study. Now, this is amazing to me. You know, the SQL injection errors and cross-site scripting errors have been at the top of the Open Web Application Security Project's list of top 10 web vulnerabilities for more than a decade. And just this week, HackerOne published a report showing cross-site scripting errors to be by far the most common security vulnerability in web apps across organizations. Now, here's what's confusing to me. Both cross-site scripting and SQL injection are well understood. And most researchers who deal in web applications have cataloged the dangers associated with them for years and years. So the question is, why are they still such a huge problem? Why can't developers seem to get a handle on how to validate input? Because if you've never looked at these attacks, each of them, the mechanism for it is a string that you type into or paste into the address bar of a browser. You know, you start out with HTTP or HTTPS : / something. Now, most of us use that something, say .com or .edu or whatever, and hit return. But we've also seen all of the times when, if you look at the full address of the page you're looking at, you see a question mark in something. You see hashtags and something. You see various symbols and an additional string. It's those additional strings which represent where criminals can embed SQL database commands or commands that give instruction to the web server itself. Now, Lou, I'm going to turn to you because we know that you are the master of all things development. Why would it be so blasted hard to do a bit of input validation on a web app? What is there some sort of super double magic juju that's required in order to make sure that someone doesn't get involved with SQL injection, for example, in your particular application?
So it's interesting. This is kind of like some organizations have this point of view that this is their grandfather's internet. Like, I think it's like organizations just move really slow to go update their services and software because, you know, it's working fine. It's out there in the wild. Why change something that's already working? Why move slow? Why move any faster than they need to be? Because it's just you're already getting customers. You're gaining speed. And so understanding some of these vulnerabilities, sometimes even going to verify them, are more expensive than just waiting for customer reporting of them. So that's kind of the sad part. That's the state of the union. That's where organizations are at. Now, that doesn't mean that there's not tools today that will go and run against your code base or against your service to verify that you're not doing fuzz testing or even smoke testing to verify that you're not vulnerable to these types of attacks. There are some services that offer that capability that are actually fairly inexpensive for an organization to kind of attack a website or verify this functionality. So that's not, for some reason, organizations are not using them more. But to go back to your question is, why people don't go fix these things? Well, again, because maybe they just they haven't found the secret sauce that goes with the DevOps and CI/CD pipelines. So it's hard for them to make a code change without maybe verifying or even checking if there's a regression in that code file or that service. And so they stop themselves from doing it. But there's really no excuse. I mean, if you think about it, having SQL injection vulnerabilities in your sites or your web apps or single page applications today is kind of it's kind of a joke. I mean, if you think about it, most web developers, there are best practices out there that most web developers follow. So it just makes those engineers and those developers look bad if they're not following those best practices. So it just makes sense to go do it. Now, I can't read organizations' mind, but I can tell you that they do move slow. Look at all the organizations still on IE 10 or IE 11 or Windows 7 or Windows XP. And so that just tells you, hey, organizations just move slow. They don't want to put the effort or the money into it to move forward. That's the only way I can make sense of it, I guess.
Okay, so Cheebert, Lou has just told us that he and all of his favorite developers around the world are just too lazy to fix the problem. And we appreciate that, and because we love him, we're going to give him a pass. So that leaves it up to people like you, someone who works as a network engineer, to install something like a web application firewall or a next generation firewall in front of the web server to solve the problem. So my question to you is, from what you have seen, how effective can firewalls be at dealing with issues at the application layer? Can a network security group solve the problem, or are you going to end up dumping it right back in the dev group's lap?
Yeah. So again, people, my opinion, the web application firewalls are truly a wonderful thing, especially when you start, talking about zero-day attacks and things like that. But this is not a zero-day attack. This is really old. My personal opinion, looking at it from an academic side, seeing the battles in classes, just the classes, the people teaching this stuff, the web admins keep pointing and saying that's the DB admin's problem. The DB admin saying, hey, you guys really should be validating data before you pass, make sure you're passing good data to the DB. I see this finger pointing happening all the time. Personally, I think it's a lot of problems with people saying, get off my turf. I'm not responsible for that. And I think the solution really is people need to go and say, hey, I may not be responsible for this problem, but I'm going to own it and fix it, because it's not that hard to fix. Data validation isn't that tough. There's some great toolkits out there. I mean, Visual Studio has amazing data validation tools. That combined with that web application firewalls, I think is a great answer, and it'll give us a foundation on which to build for future attacks. So I don't think this is that hard. I think it's just a matter of own it, people. Come on, just own it and fix it.
Lou, I'm going to come back to you now, because having heard what Brian said, it's not that you and the development crews are lazy. You're really just not that smart, and so we'll go with that as well. We can work with that. Brian was talking about things like the input validation tools that are found in the various environments for developing. We know that there are toolkits out there. We know that there are libraries out there. You were talking about legacy and the difficulty that the legacy applications can make. I have to ask, though, is this also an issue that is made worse by something like an agile or DevOps development methodology? Is this the kind of thing that good old-fashioned waterfall development with its dedicated QA group trying hard to poke holes in code, would they be more likely to catch this? And if the answer is yes, is it a serious enough problem to think about bringing them back?
Now you're getting into my master's thesis material here. So I'm going to try to keep it brief. Ideally, theoretically saying that, when you get to Agile, that means in order to move to Agile or to move to these kind of high-speed delivery mechanisms, fail fast mechanisms, you have to have the correct checks and balances in place. So one thing that, I can tell you as we've migrated some of my services over from the waterfall approach to the more agile kind of deliver and flight and put it on flights and change gates and kind of flight it out to different rings, is you have to have the checks and balances. Meaning you have to have the tests and verification to understand not only performance, security, but also functional tests in place to verify that, one, you're not regressing once you actually make those changes, but two, you are verifying the current functionality that you're fixing. And so that's kind of the ideal situation. When you're moving really quickly, you kind of have to have more automated verification in play so that you can ensure that you're pushing out something that's high quality, that has the correct performance, and it's highly secure and considers your data private. But that's not always the case. So can things be worse if you move directly from waterfall to agile? Absolutely. If you decide to kind of skip a bunch of steps and decide, you know what, today we're going to be agile, it's just not going to work. I mean, you're obviously going to be in the same problem that you have, but you're going to amplify it. So it takes a long time for you to make a security fix. Sure, it takes a long time to test a security fix. Absolutely. But if you're going to go and be in agile and you start shipping things more faster, you're going to ship a fix to a security vulnerability only to find out that you really didn't fix it and/or you made it worse. So I think it can definitely be amplified and made worse. But in the same sense, ideally, it's supposed to push better quality because you're supposed to add those layers into your system, into your workflow, so that you can verify it before it hits the wild.
Well, I think what we are finding out in this is in so much that the mechanisms are there. The technology is there. The best practices are there to make sure that this is not a problem. This is a solved problem because it's an old problem. The real question is whether enough dev shops can be given the incentive to follow those best practices, to make the investment in time, in licensing fees, in education for developers, wherever it is, make that investment to see this problem go away. I don't know about you, but I'm ready for there to be a different biggest security problem and watch us stop losing time, money, records, privacy, you name it, to a problem that is older than many of the individuals who are now taking advantage of it. Well, that does it for my bite. I know we have a great guest this week, and Lou, I'm going to turn it back over to you to get us started with our guest.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, this brings us to my favorite part of the show. We get to bring in a guest to drop some knowledge on the Twilight Riot. Today's no exception. We have today Mark Balkenende, Director of Technical Product Marketing at Talend. Mark, welcome to the show.
Hello, how's it going?
Absolutely great. Hopefully I got your name right. I apologize if I butchered it.
No worries. It was close.
Fantastic. Now, Mark, our audience really loves to hear about people's journey through tech, kind of origin stories. Maybe can you take us through the journey through the industry for you and what brought you to Talend?
Yeah, definitely. So I started out after graduation. I went to the Chicagoland area. I grew up in Iowa, so it was just natural. There's not a lot of tech in Iowa, just a few companies. So I went. I made the move to Chicago area and really got going in enterprise integration very early on. Worked through a couple different companies. Started out with the biggest name was Motorola in their automotive industry, and we built a application that now would be considered master data management, which now is slowly dying. I think is that field is a little, but according to some people at Gartner even said that. And I moved on and really focused more on integration for operations and as well as business intelligence and things like that. So got to be quite an expert over about 10 years on integration tools, ETL tools in the space. And then as MDM evolved, I got back into that because I'm always been a big fan of data and working with data and trying to make the data better for whoever the customer was that I was working at. I spent many years at Abbott Laboratories, a large pharmaceutical company, doing data integration, mostly operational data, so feeding data, which is not a traditional ETL type aspect, but using ETL methods and integration methods to load data into our operational systems for our sales force and for other types of business units within Abbott Labs, like I said, a pharmaceutical. From there, I moved into more of the master data management and working on the integration around master data management, which took me to Walgreens. I worked for corporate headquarters of Walgreens in the Chicago area, doing a huge implementation of data integration and master data management there, working with them to build, a system that when you go in to get your prescription at Walgreens and they look you up, they look your doctor up, they look up your doctor's location stuff. That's all done through a one Walgreens system that I helped implement using some tools from IBM and Initiate and things like that. So, and then in that journey, I started getting more into wanting to do consulting and enterprise architecture, and I did that for a little bit with a consulting company, which led me to actually Talend. And what led me to want to be part of Talend, like Talend, is a lot of companies talk about being a unified platform or a single platform. A lot of our competitors talk about that as well, and they truly aren't. As you start getting their tools in your enterprise, you start learning that the ETL tool is completely different than the data quality tool, and the master data management tool doesn't talk to any of the tools. And if you need to get into real time, again, that's a completely different tool set and users, and you have to have completely different teams, and it becomes very costly. And as I was evaluating Talend and using Talend at one of my customers that I was doing enterprise architecture and data strategy with, I learned that the platform was actually unified. So that was impressive. They liked my MDM skills as well as my background in data integration, and I started my journey with them about 7 years ago, almost 8 now, and it's been a fun ride at Talend. As hopefully a lot of people know, Talend has been one of the top data integration, open source integration tools out there. And we've gone through a lot of different technology waves over the years. So it's been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So you brought up a couple good topics here. I think let's go ahead and dig into them a little bit, because most organizations, they have lots of data, obviously, and they find they have issues where, how do we get this data? How do we start making use out of it? And you talked a little bit about some topics maybe some of our audience members might not be familiar with, such as MDM, which is the master data management, or ETL, extract, transform, and load. Can you maybe take us through just kind of the primer of the challenges enterprises are seeing with data today and how these solutions apply to those things?
Sure. So a lot of the problems that we're having today, or enterprises have today, it's funny. It's the same things that I dealt with, over my career in IT. We're just now have different technologies to deal with it and different sources. So there's so many sources. Data's coming from so many different places within enterprises. You now have the exception of the cloud. You talked about that earlier, Lou, about the different cloud vendors, Amazon, AWS. You have Azure and their cloud services, and Oracle and Google and everybody else. And you have data coming from SaaS applications. So you have Salesforce, Marketo for your marketing and things like that. So, for a long time, people were trying to centralize into one standard, ERP that did everything like SAP and things like that. And now it's kind of blowing back out, going to all these siloed applications now in the cloud. They're no longer on premise, and you can't manage it. So companies are having a hard time pulling that data together. We saw the big boom of big data and the Hadoop worlds, the Hadoop clusters, and then came the concept of the data lakes. And people are still working through those data lakes and trying to make those data lakes effective. But it becomes a trust problem. It becomes a speed problem. And that's where Talend, with our applications, we're really trying to help you build that balance between the speed of ingesting your data, getting your data into whatever target that is, whether it's a data lake or a cloud data warehouse, which is the newest big thing that we're all jumping on the bandwagon between, whether it's Redshift or Snowflake or Azure SQL Data Warehouse or Google, Google's BigQuery. All those are really becoming the huge target because the old guys like us or me anyway, can use SQL on those platforms, and it opens the door to a lot of developers that know SQL well. But being able to get that in there fast is one problem, and that's really been kind of the traditional problem of IT, is being able to adhere or adjust to those environments. But it's now the CDO's problem, the chief data officer's problem. They have to focus on trust and credibility of the data. How fast? It's not how fast I can get the data. It's what data do I trust? And anybody that's worked in a large enterprise knows that you can go to probably 10 different people, ask them the same thing, and you'll get 10 different answers for that one problem, because they're all using different data sources. So it's about bringing that data together and making it credible.
Now, there are a lot of solutions out there. So let me ask you this: like, obviously, there's solutions where it's kind of the first mile where data is kind of coming into a system, and then there's like the last mile where there's analytics and there's visualizations. Where does Talend fit in kind of the pipeline here?
We really support the end-to-end, and actually we don't even see the analytic visualization anymore as the end of that pipeline. People want to be able to share that data to internal partners as well as external partners through APIs and data services and things like that. So Talend can help provide that end-to-end pipeline, as well as build in that credibility or that trust of the data. So we provide tools to help you govern that data through stewardship apps, so people that know the data can work on it and not be in some type of spreadsheets like we all know and love, but they can use tools that actually give them the ability to give that stewardship kind of capability, workflows and things like that, and then govern that data throughout the entire process of the flow of those pipelines, and really build, as you're showing, speed and trust through the process with Talend Data Fabric. And we see it as a number of applications that build out that fabric, and you can use however many of those applications you need to make your enterprise successful. But we feel that we're providing that true platform that allows both the speed and trust out to our customers to get those advantages over their customers or over their competitors. So
makes sense. So you talked a little bit about how customers are piping data. They got to do it in real time. We kind of touched on the data streaming. So organizations, they have a lot of data. They have a lot of data. Yeah. They need to be able to push it somewhere. Maybe, like you said, it could be integrating with other services. It could be that they need to do special things to it. They need to cleanse it. They need to make sure that that they do it, and they do that in a compliant way, as well as they need to maybe transform it to make sure that it matches the shape of another system. How can Talend actually help here?
So the Talend has our traditional data integration tools. We also now have a pure ingestion tool. So a lot of times it's, enterprises have the data sitting in many different places, and they want to consolidate. Maybe they want to move to the cloud, because many of our customers are starting to use that cloud storage so that they can use those cloud services. So we have, ingestion tool that just straightforward point-click web, put it out there. We have other tools that allow you to quickly build, say, Spark processes to transform the data, to look at different formats of data, reformat it if it comes in a JSON or Avro formats, and then pipe it out to a flat storage, pipe it out to a database so you can start doing those analytics on it. Being able to, Talend, we like to be kind of the Switzerland, so you can connect to all the different source or cloud environments and pull that data together. So, and what we see a lot of our customers do is one department within the enterprise may want to or choose Azure because they have Power BI experts, or they're using some of the IoT type capabilities and services, while another one will use AWS because they want to use the machine learning capabilities over in AWS, like SageMaker and things. But the corporate needs to pull that data together, and they look at Talend's tools to help pull that together, and then classify it, identify it, help catalog it. So we have a catalog tool that helps those customers know what data is trusted, know what data is the right source, and things like that, as well as track the lineage. Where did that data come from? What was the inception of it? And who's using it? So, and that all comes into that trust and credibility as well.
That makes sense. So you talked a little bit about this, I think, already, but I wanted to touch on it a little bit more. The concept, a lot of organizations today, they're kind of in this hybrid state, right? They have data coming from internal on-premise systems. They're moving some of it to the cloud. Again, they need a way to kind of merge those two pieces together, make more sense out of it, and maybe even integrate it to different other applications. How does Talend helping here? Is it again just an integration, just kind of the data stream mechanism, but how does it approach kind of the on-premise or the hybrid cloud side of things?
Absolutely. So yeah, Talend we have within what we call our Talent Cloud, and within our Talent Data Fabric, we have the ability to we have agents that you would put on your on-prem environment to pull the data into the cloud environment. So it's a much more secure way. You don't have to open up IP and ports and firewalls to move the data through. You would use your normal mechanisms to port that data through the Talent agents within our Talent Cloud offering to get that data into that single environment, and to then do that processing, whether it's like you said, visualization and BI, building out, what is the next analytic or what is the next big thing that we think we're going to offer our customers, or using that AI. So Talend gives our customers the ability through these types of tools, through these remote agents, to access their on-prem data and move it to the cloud, or vice versa, which isn't very often, but does happen. Usually it's people taking their data from on-prem applications and moving it into the cloud, and Talend and can help make that seamless, help build in quality processes while they move that on-prem data to the cloud, as well as help them automate those through you talked about the CI/CD, the continuous integration mechanisms. So we have that capabilities and give our customers the ability to build out those integration processes, those pipelines, through different mechanisms, whether it's running on our cloud infrastructure, running in Docker containers and things like that, orchestrating it through AWS Fargate or Azure pipelines and things like that. So
fantastic. Now, I actually was surprised to see there's actually a free version called Open Studio. Now, there's your Open Studio, there's the Talend Cloud Studio, where you actually can build these orchestrations of data. Like, what's the difference between the two? How do people get started versus kind of grow up into this kind of enterprise or organizational solution?
Sure. So the Open Studio that you're talking about, that's been our flagship open product since the day Talend was founded in France. It's a Eclipse-based studio, and it has a lot of capabilities in it. It allows you to build integrations from all kinds of source and targets, but it's a single user environment. So that tool, you can build jobs. One person can. You can't share the jobs with other people easily. You can't do version control and things like that. The Cloud Studio, or the cloud version, works with our Talent Cloud. You can build in. It has the built-in capabilities of version control with Git and things like that. But you can deploy those processes into our Talent Cloud, our SaaS offering, where you can then run the integrations from the Talent Cloud. You can run them from your remote engines on-prem, whatever your situation is, if it's a hybrid or pure cloud. But it gives you all that monitoring, scheduling capabilities. So the Open Studio is really just kind of an introduction. It gets the developer started. It's really geared towards a much more ETL engineer or data engineer to build those integrations. And then our cloud offering is what you use to then monitor, manage, and give those enterprise capabilities that somebody would need.
Got it. So I do want to ask a little bit about competitors, because obviously there are some competitors in the space. I know I've seen Informatica. They've been around for a while. There's obviously IBM and Vosphere. They're getting in the MDM side of things. I've also seen some other kind of more lighter solutions around what we call workflows or application solutions, like companies like Azuqua. I think Okta just recently acquired them, where they kind of focus on particular solutions or business processes. How does Talend kind of compare? Like, what are you guys doing that's different?
Yeah, so you mentioned the big one, Informatica. They're definitely one of our number one competitors. We definitely feel that with Talend, being a unified platform running through the native capabilities, we can give customers the ability to build out that speed and trust that we talked about earlier, much easier, much faster, and focus on the right people in the right places at the right time. Some of the other smaller players, lighter weight players are, we look at like Matillions and Illuma, which was just acquired by Google, as the front end of the process, being able to quickly ingest data. And we have just not too long ago acquired Stitch, which is a integration tool to help address that front end part of the market, and build that end-to-end solution where you really can anybody can build an integration with Stitch, as long as you have the right credentials. It's pretty easy to do. You can do it within 5 minutes. Say you can take Facebook ad data or Google ad data and get it into Snowflake under 5 minutes. Super easy to build. Anybody can do it that has the credentials to those environments. But it's really that end-to-end that we feel Talend can provide a better solution than our competitors. The ability to both give you speed, whether it's through Spark processing within your favorite Spark environment, whether it's EMR or Databricks, or you pick Apache straightforward, or the trust with the catalogs and the data stewardship capabilities and the preparation capabilities that we offer. Again, we feel it's that end journey, the full pipeline of the data, even out to our recent offering with our API services, being able to build APIs and deploy them out to gateways, and build that back end for the APIs as well. So not only do you get the data, you have your trusted data, but now you can share the data out, and it's in that single platform. So we feel that really is what makes Talend the differentiator.
Fantastic. Well, do you want to bring my co-hosts in, because they're excited about asking some questions? So let's throw it over to Curt first.
Okay, thanks, Lou. I appreciate that. I think my first question, we've heard a lot about the different things that your systems will do, but from an illustration process, could you give us like an example of how a company might incorporate what you provide into their application architecture?
So we, from an application architecture, if you're talking about supporting the back-end applications, like building an application itself with Talend, that's not necessarily something we do a lot of. It does play into our API and our API services and our data services capabilities that we have, being able to build out that application. Our specialty is really more that pipeline of data, being able to bring data into your whatever that storage infrastructure is, whether it's a data lake on S3 or a cloud data warehouse, being able to massage the data, build the quality into your data, trusted data, and then pushing that to your analytics, and then or pushing it out to a place where you may want to share the data through data services and API services. So I don't know if that answered your question, Curt.
No, it's a step, and it actually leads into my next question, because one of the things that certainly Talend's website talks about is the data governance side. Yeah. And data governance is about several things, including data assurance, data quality assurance, and being able to provide a verifiable statement about those things. So, we've talked about process and all that. Can you talk a bit about, how it's used in this data assurance and data quality governance side of things, especially, as a company might have some regulatory issues around governance?
Yeah, absolutely. So that really plays into what we call our Talend data catalog. And the catalogs today, again, it's kind of a trend that has come back to life because of data lakes and these movements to these cloud storage and stuff. And with GDPR, they became even more popular, more needed in the governance space, as you were talking about. So the Talend, our catalog, gives our customers the ability to see that and govern where is the data coming from, what people have proven that this data is the right data or certified data. So it sort of gives the workflow process. It gives us the ability to catalog or categorize data. Is this data GDPR data? Is it PII? What type of, or is it SOX related? So you can classify your data. You can have data owners go in and say and certify this is the trusted source. This data should not be shared or needs to be highly secure, things like that. So that's what the catalog's for. And then on top of that, our catalog gives that full end-to-end lineage of the data. So not only being able to do those things, Curt, like talking about, hey, is this the right data? Is this trusted data, or is this, what type of category of data is it? But also being able to quickly identify from a business standpoint or business user saying, hey, this data came from Salesforce or it came from CRM Dynamics, and it's going into these 4 repositories, and it's in these X reports in Tableau or wherever the data is going. And now I can see the transformations as well without having to go into an ETL tool or go into some scripting tool to find out how that data was manipulated. So that's how Talend is helping our customers solve those problems, and we're helping some very large customers solve some very large GDPR issues very quickly with our catalog and with the entire data fabric. So.
I love that you mentioned very large GDPR issues. I don't think I've heard anyone yet talk about small, trivial GDPR issues. So I'm glad you're able to help with that. There's a lot more I would love to ask you, but I know that my co-host and good friend Brian out in Hawaii has some questions that he is eager to ask. So Brian, I'm going to hand off to you.
Yeah, and actually, this is going to be kind of a combo question. I'm pulling a question from Specs in the chat room and asking to maybe combine a little bit. He's asking, how is the trust established? And I've had a little bit of experience with data mashup tools that gave me, shall we say, a primitive version of what you're talking about. But one of the problems I've had with them is the way that they've held on to the credentials. The one that I was playing with a long time ago actually would not pass a lot of security audits. How do you deal with this? How are you holding on to the credentials and the trust relationships?
So within the catalog, and most catalogs are using the very similar concepts today for building the trust is more through the crowdsourcing concepts within the catalog, and we do that as well. So the more people that rank the data, or the more the owner, the higher the data owners put on those the data that's coming through, or the metadata about those objects that need to be trusted, anything related to revenue or PII or GDPR related things, the people that have been identified as the owners of those within organizations, they're the ones that have to go into the catalog and mark those particular pieces or those objects, the part of the metadata as trusted, as certified, and continue to certify those things over time. There's workflows that make people go in and redo those after a certain amount of time, recertify the objects, data objects and sources and targets. And if something changes, we have workflows that automatically notify those people that, hey, there's been a change on an upsource system or a downstream system that may impact how the data is reflected and trusted. So that's how we do it within our platform today.
Well, Mark, we're running a little low on time. Thank you so much for being here. I did want to give you a chance to maybe go and tell the folks at home where the people can find Talend, where they can learn about it, where organizations go to get started, that kind of thing.
I would definitely recommend just going to our website at www.talend.com. You can get started looking at the different solutions that we have. We just released a new product that was just shown there called the Pipeline Designer. It's a brand new web-based tool that gives you the ability to build data pipelines And I encourage you to do a trial of that and give us feedback if and how it works. But it's a great new tool. And that's where I would get started, especially if you're looking at building those pipelines. If you're looking at doing more of the governance things that we talked about with catalog and data quality, then I would definitely just reach out to the contacts under the quality governance section within the website and get started talking to us there. And we can get started with that. But definitely a great place to go and learn more about us. So thank you very much.
Thanks again, Mark. Well, folks, you've done it again. You sat through another hour of the Best Dang Enterprise podcast in the universe, according to 9 out of 10 Kafka cluster nodes. But I want to make sure I thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially my co-host in crime, starting with our very own geek in paradise, Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, where can the folks at home find you and all of your work?
Love to hear from you on Twitter. I'm ADVNETLAB, Advanced Net Lab. Or you're welcome to drop me an email at cheebert@twit.tv, but I think it'd probably be best to use twyit@twit.tv, and that way it hits all the hosts. And stay tuned. The episode, segment 5 of Cheebert's Kitchen, Solving VoIP Garble Problems, is coming up right after we close up.
Fantastic. Thanks, Cheebert. Of course, we have to thank our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, where can the folks find you and all of your work?
Well, as always, they can find my writing over at Dark Reading, darkreading.com. Starting to do some interviews, some little previews of what people can expect to hear in the presentations and tech panels there at Black Hat. And as always, I would love to hear from you. Please feel free to hit me up on Twitter at KG4GWA. I'm also over at Instagram, Curt_Franklin. Would love to hear your thoughts on what's happening in security and the issues you would like to see us look into in greater depth. And I'll ask the help of our friends out in the Twilight Riot. I'm taking a deep look at some of the things used in embedded control like FPGAs. If you have any insight into security around FPGAs, would love to hear from you and talk to you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Curt. Well, folks, we also have to thank you as well. You are the person who drops in each and every week to watch and listen to our show to get your enterprise goodness, and we want to make it easy for you to watch and listen to the show. So go out right now to our show page at twit.tv/twyit. There you can find all the amazing back episodes, all of the show notes, co-host information, guest information, and all the links to the stories that we do during the show. But more importantly, next to those videos, of course, you get those helpful download and subscribe links. Support the show by getting your audio version, your video version, or HD video version of your choice. Listen on any one of your devices, as well as to stay on top of your enterprise news for each week. Now, after you subscribe, also know that we also do the show live each and every week, 1:30 p.m. Pacific time on Fridays at live.twit.tv. Go ahead and jump in and watch the show live. And if you're going to watch the show live, jump into our chat room live as well, irc.twit.tv. There we have some great characters. We get some great questions during the show. Specs, Beatmaster, Real Body, a bunch of people in there really giving us some great questions and some good discussion points. So jump in there and join them as well. Of course, remember Cheebert said, don't forget episode number 5, Cheebert's Kitchen, solving VoIP and UC garble problems here coming after the show. So make sure you stay tuned for that as well. Also, don't forget you can follow me at twitter.com/LouMM. I'll get that right somehow. You get to see what I do on my normal job at Microsoft each and every week. Also, you can check out dev.office.com as well. There we show the latest and greatest ways to customize Office and extend it so you can make it more productive for you and your organization. I also want to thank everyone who makes this show possible. Of course, thank you to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support us each and every week to do This Week in Enterprise Tech, and we couldn't do it without their support. Of course, thank you to all the engineers at Twit. And of course, thank you to our loyal producer, Mr. Brian Chee. He does all the bookings, the plannings for the show. We couldn't do the show without him. So thank you to him for all his support. And before we sign out, we have to thank our TD for today. Victor, you have actually a little bit of a lit camera on you there.
Yeah,
of course, we have to do our tradition. Tradition, man. We got to stick to tradition. What was the basic topic of today's show?
Well, it's actually a big one because It's also a life one. The best way to get rid of your problem, to make your problems go away, is to own it and fix it. That's from both Curt and Brian.
To own it and fix it. Okay. We'll get. It's kind of close. It's close. I would say building data trust was one of the main topics, but you were really close this time. Really close. Really close.
I'll take it.
All right. Well, folks, until next time, I am Lou MARESCA, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep quiet.
Hi, this is Brian Chee, Cheebert, and we are talking with Tim Titus, the CTO of Path Solutions. This is all about TWIET, after school specials, because we want to learn more about voice over IP and give us some tools to troubleshoot and do our job better. Tim, this is the last of our segments, last of our after school specials. On this time, we're talking about garbled voice. Obviously, this is pretty obvious. If I can't understand the word you're saying, it's probably garbled. But let's go talk about what causes it. What's actually happening? You know, obviously, in the plain old telephone days, POTS communications, garbled could mean anything from water dripping over the contacts to maybe cockroaches or mice chewing at the wires. But in a digital age, not so much. What are the causes in a digital age?
Well, I want to step back and just do a little bit of history there, because you mentioned the rats, you mentioned the water, and I'm thinking about that and laughing because some of the problems that are completely gone is something that we don't think about, is you just don't have crosstalk anymore. I remember being on an old POTS line and I'd be talking to somebody and I'd occasionally hear somebody else's conversation. And it'd be a lower volume. It'd be kind of off to the side. And I'd sit there and say, wait a minute, I'm hearing somebody else order a pizza. And I'm thinking, what are they doing on my phone line? And it's the fact that with old POTS lines, you had enough electromagnetic interference where you'd end up having one call be able to jump over and have a subcarrier on the other call. You'd actually be able to hear a bit of those phone calls. The FBI loved it because they could just sit there and listen into any phone call they wanted, whereas modern day, you need a sniffer to actually be able to copy the packets to listen into a phone call. But you just don't have crosstalk like you used to. You don't have static like you used to. And static was created by a lot of water penetration into a lot of old phone boxes. So a lot of problems just are becoming history that we can say, gee, I remember, kind of like those modem screeches that nobody hears anymore. Those problems are just disappearing from the landscape. This is one of those problems that will eventually disappear. I think that some of us will have heard garble. If you haven't heard garble, you may not ever hear it again. But effectively, what garble sounds like is you're on a phone call, and then somewhere in the middle of the phone call, all of a sudden you hear some very rapid, and then it continues on, and you're wondering, what the heck was that? And the garble might only lasted for a second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds, but you're wondering, where is this coming from? Well, what causes garble is analog to digital conversion. And so if you had let's say you have a really nice Polycom speakerphone in a conference room, and it's one of these really nice $1,000 jobs, and it's still analog. You don't want to have to replace it because it's expensive to replace with a digital phone. So you put a little ATA box under the desk, which is an analog transceiver that will convert the analog on one side of the phone to digital on the other side. And now it's on your phone system. So it's doing analog to digital conversion. And on that speakerphone, you dial 9, you get an outside line. Maybe it's taking a local phone line. And if you don't have a local trunk, it's going out a POTS line on your phone system. So it's now being converted back from digital back to analog to go back on the POTS phone line. You're now going across country to another phone system at another company. Let's say they end up having a POTS line that it's connecting through. It's then going from their POTS line back to a digital connection. Then let's say it goes to another ATA box under somebody's desk that connects to an old style Mickey Mouse phone that the person insists upon having on their desk because they love the look of the phone. That's a lot of A to D and D to A conversions. You're converting analog to digital and then digital to analog and then analog back to digital and then digital back to analog. With all of those conversions going along, they all end up affecting each other. What that means is one of them gets slightly missynchronized doing the conversion. It throws the other one into missynchronization, throws the other one into missynchronization. They all get out of synchronization, and they all end up resetting and then saying, okay, we're going to fix this problem. They reset. They get back to converting the analog to digital and digital to analog, and it recovers. So the good news is they all recover really well. The bad news is that this problem happens because one of them gets out of step, and it causes everybody to trip. So it's a sort of problem that's disappearing because there aren't as many analog phones. There's not as many ATA boxes in an environment anymore.
So do we just wait and hope that everybody changes to digital phones? Or is there something that we can do to help this along?
Well, you help it along by getting rid of those analog devices in your environment. If you have, let's say your boss comes up to you and said, hey, they just had a very important conference call in the conference room, and they said it was really bad. We had a whole lot of garble going on. And you say, okay, boss, sign the check here. We're going to convert that to a digital phone. And they're like, what? How's this going to solve the problem? If you get rid of the ATA boxes in your environment, you're going to reduce the likelihood of this happening. If you get rid of your POTS line and say, we're going to all digital, we have SIP trunks going outbound on our connection, that everything stays digital all the way through from endpoint to endpoint, you dramatically reduce the chance of this occurring. And so in many organizations, I'd say, just get rid of all of the analog devices. And as you get rid of them, this problem will just disappear because you're getting rid of them. The remote company, your boss is going to say, gee, everything's fine, but we only hear the garble when we call that remote company. Well, it's a problem with their phone system. It's not something you can fix in your environment because you've already gotten rid of all the analog stuff in your environment.
Wow. Okay. Well, it sounds like it's the death knell for analog lines if Tim Titus is to have his way. Well, actually, I would too. Though I got to admit, I still use POTS in certain places just because I want to have, wireless phones, and my IT group doesn't let me have digital wireless phones yet. Well, hopefully that'll change.
You need to admit, you've got a Mickey Mouse phone on your desk. You just want to drive that Mickey Mouse phone.
No, it's not a Mickey Mouse phone. It's Garfield.
There you go.
Well, Tim, this has been a really enlightening set of talks, and I'm hoping our viewers got some value out of this, and I'm hoping they head to your website, which is www.pathsolutions.com, and go and check out your blog because it's got an amazing amount of really, really good information there. And, having the tools, knowing your network makes a huge, huge difference. So, Tim, is there any place else that our viewers can go to get a better view into what Tim Titus is doing, helping to solve the world's networking problems?
Well, it's primarily I just write the blogs and hope somebody reads them. Actually, no, we have a good readership amongst the blogs, but that's really my focus of trying to get the world to be able to help solve these problems. Being a good steward of engineers, I figure helping them solve the problems, whether we sell products or not, is really kind of my game. So if it's not there, you can reach out to us via the website. We'll see what we can do to help you out regardless, because our purpose as engineers is to make other engineers' lives better.
Well, thank you very much for a truly enlightened attitude. And, I'd like you folks to tell me what you thought. This was our first try at a Twilight After School special. And we wanted to dig into voice over IP as our first topic and go in and go at it as problems, how to solve them, how to identify them, and things like that, and especially concentrate on best practices. Did you like it? I'm Cheebert at twit.tv, or I'm also on Twitter at ADVNETLAB, Advanced Net Lab. Love to hear from you. This set of after-school specials was driven by you, the viewer, and I'd like to hear more from you. What kinds of topics do you want us to do deep dives on? Topics that won't normally fit into the regular Twilight episodes. We need more time. We need more space. And we need generous people like Tim Titus of Past Solutions that are willing to help us expose some of the best practices of voice over IP troubleshooting. This has been Cheebert, and thank you for listening.